This is Joanne B. from My Favorite Things with this week's Feature Friday. Today's project focuses on heat embossing and watercoloring. I'm using the Inspired by Flowers Set 3 for my project today. And to begin with, I've stamped the image with Brilliance ink, which is great because it stays wet long enough for you to be able to cover the image with embossing powder. I'm stamping the image directly to a piece of craft cardstock. And now I'm going to place a brown paper lunch bag, which I've creased in the center, just to collect any extra embossing powder. I'm using some clear embossing powder and I'll just coat the full image. Now by turning it on its side, I'll collect all the extra so there's no loss. Just give your cardstock a good tap to make sure any extra comes off. And I pour it all back in so there's no shrinkage. I'm just going to give that one more wrap on the side of the table to make sure that any clear embossing powder that isn't actually stuck to the image is shaken off. And now I'm going to use my heat tool. I've got my heat tool turned on and I'm always going to hold it at least a few inches from my stamped image for safety purposes. Right now you can see the image is really dull that's covered over in that powder. I'm going to keep moving the heat tool around and warming up the embossing powder, making sure it's never too close to the heat source. Now you can see the image is turning from dull to shiny. That means the embossing powder has melted. Just make sure you've melted all of it, and once it's reached the shiny stage, you can stop so it doesn't scorch the paper. Now that it's embossed, that ink is waterproof, which is the whole reason I had done this. I wanted to watercolor today. Embossing gives a nice detail, but it also is perfect if you want to add any liquid medium to your projects. Now the ink is firmly set and you're not going to have any bleed. Today I'm using twinkling H2Os and a water brush. And I'm just filling in that whole image kind of roughly for a watercolor feel. And now I'm going to skip ahead so you don't have to watch the whole thing. Ah, voila, magically, the image is all painted in. So I've just done one nice even coat with that first color. And now I'm going to go back and I'm going to add a second coat. See how it's all shiny? I love those twinkling H2Os. Now I'm going to go and add a little bit more definition with a deeper color. So I've grabbed a second pot of twinkling H2Os. And these images, these Inspired by Flowers images, are great because all you need to do is add your shading to the darker spots. The image really has done all the hard part for you. Following the lines of where the image is darker, I'm just painting in a little bit of color with the darker pot of color. Going in over all those darker black spots. Now using the water in my water brush, I'm just going to smooth out those lines so they're not so harsh. Giving a little bit more water will spread out the pigment so it's a little bit more fluid and you don't have such harsh lines of coloring. Just blend it out a little bit. And now I'm going to set it aside to dry. If I had the right color H2Os, I would finish painting this, but since I don't, I'm going to reach for my handy Copic markers and add just a little bit of yellow to the center. And now I'm going to cover the leaves with green. Again, you'll see that these images make it so easy. I'm going to fill in the entire outline of the leaf with my lighter green, and then I'm going to go over just the parts that are really the dark black pigments. I'll cover with a darker green for some shadowing. Again, the illustrator and the designers have done a great job. All you need to do is use the image as your guide. To add a little bit of detail, I'm taking the scripted font from First Class Friends and stamping it with Distress ink. It's just a faint little touch that you'll barely be able to see, but I like it. It makes it that the image isn't floating so much in space. So I'm just going to repeatedly ink and stamp that text print in the Distress ink. It's just really subtle. And once I'm finished that, I'm going to give a quick coat of Distress ink all the way around the edge of my oval. I love this ink blending tool. Just a nice little bit of detail. Today I'm building my image into a tag, and I wanted to show you that the embossing also does such a nice job if you want to use the heat embossing technique on your sentiments. Just makes them stand out a little more. Again, I'm laying the image over a piece of brown paper bag folded in the center, tap off the excess, and funnel that right back into the jar. Now again, using my heat tool, I'm going to warm up that clear embossing powder to the point that it's melted but not burned. And you'll know you've done it correctly when it goes from that kind of grayish looking to a real nice shiny black. And now here's a look at the finished project. Thanks so much for visiting with us today. Please join us at mftstamps.com.